Welcome to our one-on-one discussions with the major candidates to be the next mayor of Boston. My name is Jim Rooney, and I'm the president and CEO of the Greater Boston Chamber of Commerce. The Chamber is the region's leading business voice, representing 1,300 businesses who collectively employ hundreds of thousands of people in and around Boston. Candidates are participating in many forums across the city, and in this conversation, we want to focus on the issues that are priorities for the business community of Boston and the big and small employers who drive economic success by creating and sustaining jobs. For many years now, Boston has enjoyed tremendous growth. The city attracts young talent, incubates life-changing innovations, and supports new development. We punch above our weight, so to speak, accounting for 2.2% of the national GDP, even though we have just 1.5% of the national population. The next mayor has the challenge of growing and maintaining this success in a changed world. We've seen in the last year that a city's economic vibrancy and success is fragile, and across the US, both businesses and people are relocating. Oftentimes, relocations are driven by the costs of living and working, regulation, taxation, issues of public safety, and failures of local and state governments to meet the needs of its key industries and businesses. The risks are acute for Boston because we rely mightily on talent and employers that are now mobile. In our next mayor, the business community seeks a partner who is willing to work side by side to compete in the global and mobile economy. Today's discussion is one way to learn about the candidates. The candidates also completed a questionnaire we developed, and responses are posted on our website. The candidate field will be narrowed to 2 finalists in a citywide primary election on Tuesday, September 14th. The Chamber hopes all Bostonians will engage in this election by learning about the candidates and exercising their right and privilege to vote on election day. Our purpose at the Greater Boston Chamber of Commerce is to make Boston the best place for all businesses and all people to succeed. Let's have a conversation about how we can do that together. I'm pleased to introduce candidate John Barros. John Barros was born in the Roxbury neighborhood of Boston and resides in Dorchester with his wife and 4 children. In 2010, he was appointed to the Boston School Committee, and in 2014, Mayor Walsh appointed him to lead the first ever economic development cabinet in the city of Boston. John, welcome.
Thank you, Jim. Good to be here.
There's a lot we'd like to cover today, John, so we'll ask you to keep your answers succinct, but let's get started. First, the big question, why are you running for mayor?
Jim, I'm running for mayor because I've spent frankly, my life trying to improve the city of Boston. I started at the age of 14 as an organizer at the Dudley Street Neighborhood Initiative, a youth volunteer. While we were pushing for economic justice in our neighborhood, pushing to improve a neighborhood that was haunted by high rates of crime, haunted by a lot of vacant lots, and frankly, disinvestment and redlining. The work I did with the Dudley Street Neighborhood Initiative taught me a lot. But one of the things it taught me is if you want to see a different city, if you want to have a different neighborhood, you've got to step out there and do the work and be willing to be part of the change. That's why I'm running for mayor. I've got 4 kids, and I want to make sure that this city is a city that sees them and that supports them and the next generation of youth in our city.
Oh, I want to shift, and you alluded to it, shift to one of the biggest challenges facing the new mayor, and that is tackling equity and economic inclusion. Issues of racism, inequality, and the gaps in our society have appropriately been elevated in our public discourse. And I know this is a big challenge for the mayor or the future mayor, but what's the business community's role in creating a more equitable Boston?
Yeah, great question, Jim. When I first went into government, I had committed to, in fact, making sure we did a disparity study and looked at city spending and procurement and understand what the city could do more in terms of equity and participation and helping to support small businesses owned by people of color and women. I was successful in leading the effort of a successful disparity study that got us a commitment by the city, by the mayor, Mayor Walsh, before he left, in an executive order that at least 25% of contracts, which represent about $180 million, will go to businesses owned by women and people of color every year. It's important that the business community, I think, join in that conversation. Take a look at procurement. Take a look at, who they're buying goods and services from, and then make a commitment to diversify the businesses that they're working with. I know some have done it, Jim. I know you've led some amazing work in having those conversations as Chief of Economic Development. In fact, I took some of the language that was used by Massport to include diversity and inclusion in the evaluation of proposals that were responding to requests for developing on city-owned land. The city now looks at diversity ownership in the same way that Massport did it under the 7 criteria to make sure that's factored in our scoring. And we need to do more of that work as government, and we need to do more of that work in partnership with our private sector.
I want to move on to real estate development, which, as you know, is at times controversial, but an important part of our growth. What's your view of the city's development review process? We've heard from candidates that it needs to be streamlined. What does that mean?
Well, I do think that we've heard from a lot of developers that the review process is too onerous and in many ways too costly. Developers have to pay a price with the time that they're spending and the amount of sort of back and forth. We need to make sure that by expediting the process that we are talking to residents and creating plans that are clear, that are supported by neighborhoods, so that developers can come in with a sense of clarity for what's going to be supported, and that the city's bureaucracy, if you would, doesn't get in the way and make it more expensive. Boston's already an expensive city, so I've already proposed in my housing plan 2 things. One is that we need to create more housing in the city of Boston. We haven't kept pace with the population. I remember sitting in the mayor's office talking about our 69,000 unit goal and wondering whether the population growth would continue. Well, actually, the population growth outpaced our projections. So we need to build more, and then we need to build more affordably. And so in my housing plan, I've called for a streamlined permitting process for any development that includes affordable housing. And I think as a city, we shouldn't be in the way, and we shouldn't be making it more costly for developers to build.
Right. Sticking to development, the Seaport District has been criticized by many of the candidates. What do you think is wrong with the way the development unfolded in the Seaport? What would you have done differently, or what would you do differently going forward with such an opportunity?
Well, I think there are a number of things that we've learned from the Seaport. First, I'll give the Menino administration some credit for turning around an area that had a bunch of parking lots. And, sort of when they first, I remember, talked about the Innovation District, some people laughed. Talking to Mitch Weiss, he talked about there were a lot of naysayers. But they did turn it around, and maybe they didn't even believe that they were going to be able to turn it around this way and have this kind of development. But what's missing is real investment in transit infrastructure in the Seaport. We see the traffic in and out of the Seaport is not conducive to the kind of growth that's already been approved in the Seaport. And so, as you asked the question, what we would do differently, master planning would include more transit infrastructure. And then, there's not a lot of participation, not a lot of diversity in the Seaport. And that's unfortunate. We, in fact, should be more intentional about centering equity and participation in the growth of any neighborhood. With the new disparity study we have the opportunity, in fact, to set goals on participation in construction, but also set goals on participation of who is going to be operating the different retail spaces in our new buildings, or be able to own the different part of condos or different commercial spaces in our neighborhoods. We need to be more intentional about that as a city, and then not just in planning, but also in providing the capital that's needed for people to participate, the technical assistance, and make sure we're doing the recruitment in a way that people understand what the opportunities are.
Right. Let's talk about education, John. The business community cares deeply about education because, as you know, today's students are tomorrow's workforce. And during the pandemic, the poor physical condition of the schools in Boston was highlighted as in need of more capital than I think the city has available or could possibly have available. Before the school department spends hundreds of millions of dollars, do we have too many school buildings, or would you address the results of the 2015 audit, for example, that revealed that BPS should consolidate schools? And I think even since then, there's 3,800 less students in the Boston public school systems. Do we have too many buildings?
What we do have is we have a major problem with our facilities, and we don't have the right facilities. We don't have the right buildings. When you look at it from a square footage standpoint, Jim, we have buildings that are not appropriately designed for the needs of today. It's not that we have too much square footage. What we have is a poor distribution of students in certain buildings. We have space that we're not using in certain ways. We do need to spend a lot of money and time to upgrade our facilities. And this is something that we should do urgently. What we'll find is that we're going to need some swing space to make sure that we don't disrupt education while we're building new facilities, but that ultimately we will increase the footprint of many of our schools because we will need theater space. We're going to need art studios. We're going to need science labs. We're going to need space that we don't currently have in the old designs of our school buildings that need to happen. So the school footprint will grow, and I think the number of facilities will shrink. But we need to do it in a way by recognizing that when you build a new school, as the city did, for example, with the new Dearborn STEM Academy, it's a gorgeous school with appropriate space. But we needed swing space. We need to make sure that those students are somewhere else while we're building. So let's use the fact that we have excess space, get the students in those swing space, grow the footprint of our schools, and then downsize the number of buildings.
Sticking with education, John, as you know, the Chamber is a strong advocate for Madison Park High School and vocational education in general. How would you create world-class career and vocational technical education in Boston? And can you give us some specifics on that?
Yeah, absolutely. Madison Park is Madison Park is a gem in the rough. We need to make sure that we're paying attention to it. And there are some things that I would do very specifically to do that. First, let me say this. The economy is shifting in front of us, and there are new needs for the kinds of talent that would allow Boston to continue to grow. For example, Madison Park should be part of the work development ecosystem in Boston that prepares people for the labs that are now being built in our city. We have a lab boom in our city. The city approved over 16 million square feet of space during the pandemic year, last year, and many of those buildings were driven by lab space. Madison Park should be on the forefront of a program that would do workforce development so that our students could be prepared for the jobs that are coming to our city. That's just one example. Right now, I would look at the work that the Career Champion Network is doing at Madison Park, where outside stakeholders, partners are coming to Madison Park and looking at programming. They are helping with a look at resources that are coming to the school, and they're seeing some improvements. We're seeing improvements at Madison Park in terms of retention, demand by students, performance by students. We're seeing some improvements in terms of the money that's coming to Madison Park to help those programs. And so for the first time in years, we now have an evening program at Madison Park. That used to be a staple of the school. And so now we're returning to that. Madison Park needs to have its own staff. I've called for a separate structure to staff up the Madison Park complex to make sure that there is enough capacity to work with outside stakeholders who want to work with Madison Park. It is right now not partner ready. which is why we don't have the kinds of, we're not in alignment with Chapter 74 programs, Jim, which calls for outside boards to help oversee these programs in partnership with the school. And part of that is that we don't have the right capacity to engage the outside partners. We need to scale up the Career Champion Network and make sure that we have the right staffing at Madison, engage our business community and those who want to help those support those programs, and make Madison Park the kind of VOTEC school that we should all be proud of, and in many ways it should be the best VOTEC school in the state.
John, in my opening remarks, I noted that some relocation of business and people occurs because of public safety. Movements to defund the police have swept across America. What does that phrase mean to you? And I know that the police budget this year was cut. In a Barros administration, what would the police department budget look like in 2023?
You know, Jim, defund the police is, I think, not helpful. We need a vision for how we transform policing. We need a vision that starts with a call to have the best police department and the best policing in the country. One that is transparent, one that holds police officers accountable for any transgressions, for making sure that policing is fair, for making sure that our practices are equitable. We need to be able to get reports from the police when we ask for it. We need to make sure that we can stand up the civil review board that's made up of residents to help review police investigations and make sure that it's fair and transparent. There's a lot of work that we need to do with policing to make sure that Boston continues to move into the age where police and policing can be fair, and that black men like me don't have to leave my house in fear, both of myself and my safety, or my child's safety as young black boys leaving my house. But that doesn't mean defunding the police. In fact, the cut to police budget that we saw this year is going to end up in the same way as the cut last year to police budget. We're going to still need policing, and we're going to call on policing. And so we this year we cut, I believe the city cut overtime. We cut overtime at a time when the police is understaffed. There is not enough police officers in the department. We saw it firsthand as we were monitoring the level of police officers during the COVID pandemic. When we were a city of 600,000 residents, we had about 2,400 police officers on the streets almost every day. Today, as a city of about 750,000 residents, we have about 16 to 1,800 police officers on the streets almost every day. And that's just not enough. And if you don't have enough police officers, you're going to need more overtime by each individual police officers because there are just more needs in our city. We need to staff up the police. And when we staff up the police, we need to make sure it's a diverse group of new police officers that are coming in, and that the entire force is trained for sensitivity, for de-escalation, and around anti-racist policies that we need to adopt in the force and implement. So we need a new vision for police that's positive and not about defunding, but on making sure that the outcomes are right and just for everyone.
John, I want to talk about talent. It's our competitive advantage. Businesses come here because of our talent, so we hope that it'll be top of mind for any mayor. How can we do a better job as a city attracting and retaining diverse talent?
As you know, Jim, talent is critical. It's the number one selling point for our city. As Chief of Economic Development, most of my conversations started with the talent in our city. And so talent starts with investment in the development of people. We do it because we're a city of many schools, but we need to also continue to do it with our neighborhood residents, with those in our school system. Having the best school system in the country is where that should start, and making sure that BPS gets the investment that it needs. I've called for a 12-month program at BPS, one that allows parents to have an option during the summer, that allows our students to either find a job, a camp, an enrichment program, or something that they're doing during the summer that is helping to develop them and their talent. We should coordinate that as BPS and not leave that up to parents, because some parents have the access to that information and the resources to select the right programs, and other parents don't and could use the assistance of the city in either finding the information or finding the vouchers and subsidies that they need for their children to take advantage of those programs. Summer learning loss is a big problem. We also need to make sure we have a 0 to 5 program so that we can prepare the students coming into school. We know that 0 to 5 investment is the biggest investment we can make to eliminate the achievement gap, the race achievement gap, to prepare our brown and black students to compete and be ready to read by grade 3. Except we don't have a coordinated effort. In the first 100 days, I propose releasing plans to have full 4-year-old program and a full 3-year-old program in the city of Boston. Right now, the city of Boston invests $15 million in its 4-year-old program, and I believe to complete that program and have a 3-year program, it'll cost us $75 million. I'm prepared to do that as mayor. Some of that will be paid for by the $400 million, but a big chunk of that will be paid for by the city of Boston's general fund. It is critical then that we begin to coordinate with all of the other programs in our city that are doing any kind of child development, early child development, and even child care, to make sure those programs are supporting our children's development and making sure that there's an element of curriculum and that there's an element of human development so that we can invest in the talent very early on.
Well, John, our 20 minutes went by way too quickly. So in your closing remarks, I'd like to give you the opportunity to speak to the Greater Boston business community about what they can expect from a Barros administration.
You know, Jim, I appreciate the time to talk to the business community, and thank you for doing this. As candidate for mayor, I'm the only candidate that brings the executive management skills, having helped lead the city for 7 years, having grown our economy and bringing more than 140,000 jobs to the city of Boston, bringing unemployment to 2.4%, bringing it to 4.9% in Roxbury, historic low, 5.9% in Dorchester, 5.4% in Mattapan. We've seen that growth can be shared with the neighborhoods and make sure that everyone is doing better. But the mayor that comes in next needs to have the right policies. It needs to have some intentionality in growing a more equitable and just economy, one that allows us all to participate in the wealth creation of our city. I'm prepared to do that day one. I'm prepared to help meet the challenges coming out of COVID, kickstart our economy, invest in education, and make sure that we have affordable housing that our families can prepare. Check my policies out at barrosformayor.com. And then I humbly ask for your support. Thank you.
Great. John Barros, thank you for your time today. And to all of our guests, once again, on September 14th, we hope everyone will participate in the selection and stay engaged. That concludes today's session. Thank you, John Barros.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you, John.